Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf and to my April wrap up on this 4th of May. Is it? Yes, Sunday. And spoiler alert, if you have watched my mid-month check-in, you will probably know most of the books, and that's when you click the video. Hey, I hope not. But the second half of the month, I didn't read that much, and I certainly didn't finish that much that I can talk about because, as you know, I was sick for 2 weeks and sick in a way that was not pleasant. So not the kind of sick that you are lying in bed and reading. No, I was like, heavy bronchitis. And so I couldn't read that much. I was mostly entertaining myself with Netflix. So, yeah, but anyway, the general wrap up, as I always do, I will leave a picture up here. I read 9 books in total, 4 books of fiction, 3 books of non-fiction. 2 of the fiction books were translated. Didn't read any translated non-fiction. I didn't read anything for the 1001 Women Challenge, my own challenge, as you know, 1001 books by women I want to read. And I didn't read anything for my Read Europe challenge that I started this year, trying to read at least 1 book from each European country. I did start one and then DNF'd it or skim read it, as I already told you in the mid-month check-in. I reread 1 book and I read 2 dudes. So most of the books that I read in the second half were the dude books for the BookTube prize because the end of this month is the deadline, and I still have as of now, I have still 3 books to finish. So I read 3 and I have 3 books to finish, but those books I can't talk about, which makes the books I can talk about in this wrap up, the amount even smaller. So I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, that's what you get when you are ill. So very briefly, I want to, and also for those of you who might not have watched the mid-month check-in or you have forgotten, I will mention the books that I have finished already back then. The first one was a good one, was a sci-fi book, Hiromi Kawakami, Under the Eye of the Big Bird, translated, here you can see it, by Asa Yoneda from the from the Japanese. These are interconnected short stories. I called them dystopian, but I don't want to put people off who don't normally like dystopian. Joe, I'm talking to you, because it's not your typical dystopian after, this big disaster or a war or an environmental catastrophe. That's not what I meant with dystopian. It's set in the future and the human race is close to extinction, but there is no extinction event or anything, and it is focusing not so much on this disaster event but more on the life, how the life would be in 100 or 200 years, and the span of the book is multiple decades or even more than a couple of 100 years. When AI came to fruition and the human race has to figure out a way to survive, not because they are, at war with AI, but more a general dystopian future because the survival of the human race is at peril. So don't think of this as your typical dystopian sci-fi where they had the premise of these typical dystopians is always this big disaster event. That's not it. So yes, anyway. So I finished this. I finished another sci-fi that wasn't a success for me, and that was Laila Lalami's The Dream Hotel, where I really, really thought the premise was excellent, even though it was not entirely new. If you ever watched Minority Report, the movie, it's the same premise. But there are not women who can see the future, but it's the algorithm, which is a really good premise because algorithms determine a lot of our lives already. You know, if you are on Amazon, the books you get presented, they are chosen by the algorithm. So the idea behind, or the premise behind this book, is that the algorithm is used to determine who will commit a crime. The Risk Assessment Agency is a new government agency, and they will arrest people whom the algorithm spits out as potential criminals. And that happened to our main character, Sarah. She was arrested because the algorithm thought that she might kill her husband. And then these people who are picked out by the algorithm are sent to so-called retention centers. And there they can gain points and then reduce their risk assessment. And the premise was perfect, but the execution was just not good, in my opinion. I thought there were so many plot holes, things that just did not make sense or were not consistent or contradictory even, and some very, very clunky stuff in order to get the plot moving. So this was unfortunately not a success, but if you really like the premise, you might want to try it anyway. And then the book that I was supposed to read for the Reading Europe Challenge that I more or less DNF'd or skim read was this one. The Belgian author Lise Spit had Smelt. English translation is available, The Melting. And this is a book about a young woman in her mid-20s who goes back to her little village in Belgium where she spent her youth, and there was one particular summer that went completely off rails. And you can imagine it's about abuse and about rape and about sexual harassment. And the young woman is called Eve, so Eve, and I just do not like this type of misery porn. If you enjoyed A Little Life by Yanagihari or Lukas Reinefeld, the winner of the Booker International some years ago, you might like it. Still, I feel even if you do like this type of book and you might enjoy the general thing, I still feel that this book should have been cut by at least 200 pages. It's 478 pages long, and that's 150, 200 pages too long anyway. That's what I felt when I flipped through it. And I read this together with Amelia, one of our most trusted and loyal subscribers. And she did enjoy the book, but had this exact reaction that it was too long. So yeah. And then I also read another book from the Women's Prize for Fiction. This is also Women's Prize for Fiction book, and this is shortlisted for the Booker International, I'm just saying. And that was Miranda July, All Fourth. I will leave a picture up here because I borrowed the book from the library, and that wasn't a success for me either, even though, again, I thought I picked this book up because of the premise. And the premise was that this kind of not really famous, but also not really unsuccessful mid-40s artist is taking a road trip from Los Angeles to New York. For various reasons, she doesn't fly, but takes the car, but goes off the first exit, not even it's still LA, and goes to a motel, and then she stays there for the whole length of the trip. But the book doesn't end there, or doesn't. It's not only about that. She comes home, and then she is married and has a child together with her husband, and the child is, I think, not yet 10, so it's still a small child. And then it just lost the idea of the premise and the plot, and it became this kind of book that wants to talk about too much and ends up giving me nothing. So yeah, that was all fours. Those were the books that I already talked about in the mid-month check-in. There is one book that I wanted to finish and didn't. So I'm still mentioning it, and that is this one, The Shapeless Une, My Year in Search of Sleep by Samantha Harvey. I picked this up because as you know, if you follow my channel, I really loved Orbital. She won the Booker Prize with that book last year, and it was one of my favorite reads of 2024. And I had this on my list and thought, well, I'm going to pick it up. It's nonfiction, a memoir, and as it says on the subtitle, she had trouble sleeping. And this is a rumination about what it means not to be able to sleep. And I mean really not sleeping. Her good nights are when she can sleep for 4 or 5 hours interrupted, an hour at a time. But she has many nights where she doesn't sleep, or sleeps half an hour and then wakes up for another 2 hours. And the way she talks about it, I'm more than halfway through. I really like it. So I had hoped to be able to wrap this book up in the April wrap-up, but I still have to finish it, unfortunately. The same goes for this one, Valchina Mord, Music for the Dead and the Resurrected. That is my Belarus pick. So I wouldn't have wrapped it up in the April wrap-up anyway. It's poetry, but I read I think 2 poems. So yeah. So these 2 were supposed to be read in April, but I didn't. The one book that I finished, I read as an ebook as well, and that is, so I will leave a picture up here, and that's also my one reread, and that is Rebecca Gigg's Fathoms, which was published a couple of years back, I think 2021, and I read it back then. And it is, as the subtitle said, it's about whales. And I really, really liked it. It was a 5-star read back then. And it was a 5-star read on the reread. I reread it with Heidi from My Reading Life, because it was also the April pick for the Book Naturalist Book Club. If you're not familiar, please check out Heidi's channel, My Reading Life, and or Doris's channel, All the Books. They run this book club where they pick a nature book each month, and they make a whole list for the whole year in advance. And because it's their 5-year anniversary this year, the whole year is rereads. So they picked favorite books from the last 5 years to reread this year. So Fathoms is one of those. And it is about whales, the history of whaling, for instance, but also about the whales as an animal, whales and pollution. So it tackles different topics that have to do with oceans and these huge animals. But it's a very personal account. Rebecca Giggs is an Australian journalist, science journalist, and she investigates the whale, the various aspects, but also has these her very own ruminations. She thinks about whales in a broader perspective, and I really, really enjoyed her approach. I will say she ventures into a little bit philosophical kind of territory. Not that she talks about Kant or Hegel or Plato or anything, but her ruminations are, you could call them philosophical. I loved it because it's quite different. I mean, I love books about whales and the history and the animal as such, and we learn a lot about the life of a whale and, of course, the struggle in terms of pollution. But for me, it was a very unique experience because of these more personal, and I call them philosophical ruminations that she adds to it. So I really loved the book, and I loved the reread, and I don't think it will be the last time I reread this book, because it's always difficult for me to retain all the information that these type of books give you. So yeah, this was definitely a very successful reread. So for the second half of the month. And if I'm not mistaken, I think those are all the books that I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah, like I said, it's not that I have that many. I mean, I'm happy that I made progress with the BookTube prize, but you couldn't care less because I can't talk about those books. So, anyway, so this is my kind of April wrap up. But I'm happy that as you can hear, I'm cough free. Knock on wood. And I hope that I will have much more to talk about in May. But anyway, I hope you still liked the video. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I'm very much looking forward to your comments, and I will talk to you all soon in the next one, next Sunday.